Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be continuing my series about how did Thailand survive colonialism. Now in the last episode I explained the early stages of it, and I was explaining about um how colonialism affected Thailand in the early 19th century. But that was just the beginning. Two kings, Rama IV and Rama V, witnessed the expansion of both France and Great Britain to increase their colonial territories in Southeast Asia and encircle Siam. From the west, the British conquered India, Burma, and Malaya. From the east, the French conquered South Vietnam, and claimed to be protecting Cambodia, while Siam lost its extraterritorial rights in these areas to new conquerors. The construction of the Kra Isthmus Canal, planned by a group of entrepreneurs led by an engineer Ferdinand Lesseps, was not constructed after the British conquered Kon Boang ruled Burma in the Third Anglo-Burmese War in 1885. A major event was the Pak Nam incident. On the 13th of July 1893, French cannon boats entered the Chao Phraya River towards Bangkok and were fired upon a Siamese coastal fort, leading to the Franco-Siamese War. In the same year, Siam was compelled to conclude a treaty with France in which the territory of Laos, located in east of the Mekong River, was annexed to French Indochina. The French forced Siam to refrain from any influence on its former vassal state. In 1887, the Indo-Chinese Union was founded. In 1896, British and French concluded a treaty which made a border between the colonies, with Siam defined as a buffer state. After the Franco-Siamese War of 1893, King Chulalongkorn realized the threat of the Western colonial powers and accelerated extensive reforms in administration, military, economy, and society of Siam, completing the development of the nation from a traditional feudalist structure based on personal domination and dependencies whose peripheral areas were only directly inbound to the central power, aka the king, to a centrally governed national state with established borders and modern political institutions. The Entente Cordiale of on the 8th of April 1904 was signed, which ended the rivalry between Great Britain and France over Siam. French and British zones of influence were outlined, with the Eastern Territories adjacent to French Indochina becoming a French zone, and the Western adjacent to Burmese Tenasserim a British zone. The British recognized a French sphere of influence to the east of the Mekong's basin. In turn, the French recognized British influence over the territory to the west of the Menam Basin. Both parties disclaimed any idea of annexing Siamese territory. The Anglo-Siamese Treaty of 1909 defined the modern border between Siam and British Malaya. The treaty stated that Siam relinquished their claims over Kelantan, Terengganu, Kedah, Perlis to Great Britain, which were previously part of the semi-independent Malay Sultanates of Patani and Kedah. A series of treaties with France fixed the country's current eastern border with Laos and Cambodia. In 1904, 1907, and 1909, there were new border corrections in favor of France and Great Britain. When King Chulalongkorn died in 1910, Siam had achieved the borders of today's Thailand. In 1910, he was peacefully succeeded by his son, Wachirawut, also known as King Rama VI. He had been educated at Royal Academy Sandhurst and University of Oxford, and was an anglicized Edwardian gentleman. Indeed, one of Siam's problems was the widening gap between the westernized royal family and the upper aristocracy and the rest of the country. It took another 20 years for Western education to extend to the rest of the bureaucracy and the army. The successor of King Chulalongkorn was King Rama VI in October 1910. He had studied law and history as the Siamese crown prince in Great Britain. After his succession to the throne, he forgave important officials for his devoted friends, who were not only part of the nobility and even less qualified than their predecessors, an action which had hitherto been unprecedented in Siam. In his reign 1910 to 1925, many changes were made, which brought Siam closer to modern countries. For example, the Georgian calendar was introduced. All the citizens of his country had to accept family names. Women were encouraged to wear skirts and long hair fringements, and a citizenship law. The principle of Las Sanguinis was adopted. In 1917, the Chulalongkorn University was founded and school education was introduced for all 17 to 14-year-olds. King Wachirawut was a favor of literature, theatre. He also translated many foreign literatures into Thai. He created the spiritual foundation for kind of Thai nationalism, a phenomenon unknown in Siam. He was based on the unity of the nation, Buddhism, and kingship, and demanded loyalty from his subjects to all these three institutions. King Wachirawut also took refuge in an irrational and contradictory anti-Sinicism as a result of the mass immigration. In contrast to previous immigration waves from China, women and entire families also came to the country, which meant the Chinese were less assimilated and retained their cultural independence. In an article published by King Wachirawut under the pseudonym, he described the Chinese minority as the Jews of the East. King Wachirawut also created some new social associations, for example, the Wild Tiger Corps in 1911, a kind of scout movement. In 1912, a palace revolt plotted by young military officers tried unsuccessfully to overthrow and replace the king. Their goals were to change the system of government, overthrowing the ancient regime and replacing it with a modern, westernized constitutional system, and perhaps to replace Rama VI with a prince more sympathetic to their beliefs. But the king went against the conspirators and sentenced many of them to long prison sentences. Members of the conspiracy consisted of military and the navy. The status of the monarchy had become challenged. Now, afterwards, everything evolved into